Right. Hi, this is Erica Reshley, and welcome. Hi, welcome to the ninth webinar for Embodied Eating. Today we will be going over the second pillar for Embodied Eating, the second pillar of healthy eating, and we'll be looking at how connection to our higher self, to our parts, to others, are all important for healthy eating as well. So specifically today we will be, this always happens, it goes forward to the first time. All right, so specifically today we'll be doing a loving kindness meditation. We will talk about the importance of offering gratitude for our food, and gratitude can be prayer if you're religious, or it can just be an internal acknowledgement of thankfulness. We will be connecting, as I said, to our parts, to our senses, to others, and to our higher self, and we'll be looking at that second pillar of healthy eating. And as I introduce each of these pillars, 2 weeks ago we talked about eating as a way to reduce inflammation. Today we'll be talking about eating as a way to balance blood sugar. Each of these pillars is crucial for our health and for healthy eating. All right, so every week we go over our mindful eating skills, and I want to iterate again. I like to broaden the behaviors that we are changing as a way to increase our healthy eating habits. And I like to have a way to track changes in behavior beyond losing weight. Losing weight can often be one sign that we're getting healthier, and it's not the only sign, and it isn't always indicative of health. So, other behaviors that we can utilize include, or noticing or tracking, can include noticing when we're physically hungry, and specifically for the next 2 weeks, I would really like you to focus on stopping eating a food because it doesn't taste good. So part of what we're going to be focusing on for these next 2 weeks is noticing when we eat food for comfort or pleasure, and allowing ourselves to do that in moderation. And so a corollary to that would be, not eating a food because it doesn't taste good. Sometimes we get into our rut of compulsive eating, or even just spacing out when we're eating, not noticing what we're eating, and we're eating it even though it doesn't taste that good. So I will challenge you over these next couple of weeks to slow down, really tune into the foods that you're eating. If it doesn't taste good, stop. And if it does, eat a small amount mindfully. All right. So then moving to 8, letting myself enjoy and savor all of the flavor and textures in a meal. And actually going back to 7, that would be important too. So eating something that you like a lot without eating too much of it. Eating moderately at a social gathering. So there tends to be a lot of food at a social gathering, and eating is a way of connecting with others. And so being able to eat moderately and stop when we're full, and to be able to enjoy the social aspects of the meal without being preoccupied with food. And deciding not to take a second helping because I'm already satisfied. That would be a good one, as well as 13, eating a smaller portion of a treat. So that's what I would like you to focus on in terms of mindful eating skills these next couple of weeks. And of course, we still have our behaviors to do less often. And again, we track these behaviors not as a form of punishment, but rather as a teaching tool, even if it's just teaching us humility, that we can't be perfect and that we can continue to move forward within and maybe even embracing and allowing for some of our imperfections. And of course, it is impossible to maintain mindful eating if we don't incorporate other lifestyle changes. We will abuse food if we aren't taking care of ourselves in other ways. And so that would, these are the baseline mindful behaviors that are crucial to allow us to eat in a way that we can tune into our hunger and satiety and respond appropriately to those signals. So meditation, for calming, activity as a way, again, calm, and adequate sleep. All of these things are crucial baseline behaviors. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, I read a vignette that introduced the idea or the topic of the interconnection between eating, sensuality, and connection or attachment to another. And so I read a vignette about a small child nursing and the soothing and pleasure that goes along with that. And so I want to iterate, from the moment we are born, nursing or having a bottle is a way for us to soothe ourselves. And so we learn this early and we learn this deeply. We learn that food is a source of soothing, and we learn that food is a way to connect, bond with others, and to find pleasure. And all of us have learned this well. So I didn't get to this last week, and so I want to go over it this week. This slide is taken from a book called Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Resch, and she talks about a continuum of eating that goes from normal eating behavior to more disordered eating behavior. And she says, and it's true, right? We all find pleasure in food. So we all, at times, truly enjoy the sensory gratification of food. And in previous webinars, I've talked about the neurobiological basis of that and dopamine. We all, at times, find comfort in food. And this is, when the taste or smell of food brings comfort. It's often sweets or fatty foods. And it's often foods that we associate with our childhood. So, for example, I have a weird fondness for Tang and red hot cinnamons, because these were the two treats that were always available at my grandma's house. And ice cream too. And these homemade ice cream, she always had homemade ice cream. And so to this day, the thought of those foods bring me comfort. I found her house always comforting and relaxing. And to this day, I will occasionally have a sherbet to comfort myself. And we'll get back more to that sherbet in a little bit. All right, so pleasure, using food for pleasure and occasionally using food for comfort are on the quote-unquote normal side of the continuum of eating. When we regularly begin to use food for distraction, so as a way to distract ourselves from our feelings, whether it's boredom, loneliness, anger, could even be pleasure and joy. But when we use food to distract ourselves from our life, we are moving towards abuse of food. And although food abuse in the United States is common, it's moving towards more disordered eating and towards more unhealthy eating. Moving a little further to the right on the continuum is using food as sedation. So quote unquote normal people will feel this sedation after a Thanksgiving meal or after a big buffet. And this is when you use food to such a point that you get numbed out, in psychological terms, a little bit dissociated, and you might wake up the next morning with a food hangover. And finally, using food as punishment, both physical and mental. So physically, eating enough to feel distended and bloated and uncomfortable. And mentally, beating yourself up after eating too much, or a belief that you've eaten too much. So how do we counter this? And we started this in the last session. You get to, many of us who find pleasure in food, we've been in part conditioned by this society, and in part, we take it on ourselves. We think that we shouldn't find pleasure in food, that we feel guilty whenever we find pleasure in food. We think that we won't be able to stop if we allow ourselves to eat pleasurable food. So in a systematic way, we need to start adding our favorite foods back on the menu. We need to own that we're going to eat them, and we need to eat them in a way that is respectful to our body. So continuing to eat mindfully, and not only do we find pleasure in food by adding our favorite foods back on the menu and by eating mindfully, we make the total food experience pleasurable. So we talked about this last time, setting the table, using cloth napkins, candles, music, pleasant company. So really elevating the experience of eating to something that includes sensory gratification, with the ears, with the music, visually with the candles, texturally with the napkins, and then that attachment, that connection piece. Company you enjoy. So in terms of comfort, of course, we all use food for comfort at times. That's fine. Do it. And know that you will overdo it unless you also address the true underlying need. So addressing the loneliness, addressing the boredom, and occasionally allowing yourself to eat a small amount of that comforting food with awareness. Like, oh, yeah, I had a really hard week. I really worked hard, and I'm going to go out with my kids this Friday night, and they'll get some ice cream and I'll get some sherbet. The way to decrease distraction is to mindfully observe and describe, right, the feelings that you want to ignore, stuff, or push away. The other alternative is to use other distraction options, right? Like you could go for a walk, you could take a bath, you could go on the internet. And the last alternative would be like surfing the urge, right? We've done that before. Lastly, if you regularly find yourself using food to sedate yourself or as punishment, and you have a hard time stopping, it might be helpful to work with an expert, with a therapist, with somebody who works with eating disorders, or perhaps going to an Overeaters Anonymous meeting or an Al-Anon meeting. Those are all options. And definitely have compassion with yourself. Continue to connect to yourself and to others. And begin using mantras as a way, or positive statements as a way to begin to counter this habit that can get really ingrained. All right. So today I had you bring two similar food items, two different kinds of nuts, two different kinds of fruits, whatever it may be. And what I would like us to do, because we're going to be focusing on connecting today, I want us to begin to connect to the food that's in front of us and appreciating all that is in the food and that's behind the food that's in front of our plate right now. So place your food in front of you and begin to tune into yourself and into the food. And I'm going to lead us through an appreciation for this food, and your eyes can be opened or closed, whatever feels most comfortable for you. So looking at the food in front of you, offering gratitude for the plants, the animals, perhaps, and the people whose life energy are a part of this food and have contributed to this food being on your plate. We offer gratitude for the sun, the earth, the rain, the insects who pollinate the plants, the farmers, the drivers, the grocers, and the other people who have helped to prepare this food. This food that is in front of you, it comes from the life energy that others have given, and it gives energy to our body to sustain our heartbeat, our breath, our very life. The food that goes into our body travels to the furthest cells to become our toenails, our hair, every part of us. This is a daily miracle of transformation, and it occurs in our bodies day and night. So taking a breath and just acknowledging the life energy before you that is going to go into you to make you and sustain you. So over the next couple of weeks, before you eat, offer gratitude for all of the energy that goes into the food you eat and the miracle of the food that provides your sustenance for living. So I have below here a couple of prayers that are used in different traditions. And so I have used, or I have offered prayers that are non-Christian, that are for people who are not religious, and also Hindu. And I will also send out an email that has a link to several other prayers as a possibility. If you'd like a more formal prayer, otherwise just a breath or two of gratitude, incorporating thanks and acknowledgement of receiving sustenance and life from this world. All right. And so now we'll move into our mindful eating exercise, and I will walk you through this. And so you've got your 2 sets of food before you, and go ahead and close your eyes, pay attention to your breath, and take a few conscious deep breaths. Rate your hunger scale from 1 to 10. 1 not hungry, 10 ravenous. And then go ahead and open your eyes and take in the visual aspects, the aroma, any memories of eating similar foods previously as you look at the food. Imagine how each of the 2 foods would compare. All right, and then here's the crucial part. Which food item would you prefer to eat and why? So just name that to yourself. And once you've chosen the food that's calling you right now, go ahead and pick it up and begin to mindfully observe it. So what it looks like, the aroma, the texture on the lips, and when you're ready, putting the food in your mouth and beginning to bite at a rate that allows you to enjoy the food the most. And as you start chewing, scale how satisfying this food is in your mouth on that scale of 1 to 10 with a taste satisfaction meter. So taste, aroma, how satisfying is it? And so continue to bite and notice the smell, the texture, the taste, continuing to rate your enjoyment of the food. And continue to eat this first food item, savoring the food, or until you wish to no longer eat this food item anymore. And as you finish eating this food, note any surprises or regrets in this first food choice. So do you wish you would have tried the other one? Was it not as good as you had hoped? Was it amazing? Are you glad you had it? And then once you're done with that first food item, bring your awareness back in. And again, rate your hunger on a scale of 1 to 10. Visually look at the second food item and taking into consideration your sense of hunger, your hunger for this specific food item, based on how it looks, the aroma, etc. Bring the item to your lips, feel the texture, and so you can smell a little bit better. Before you put it in your mouth, compare any similarities or differences to the first food. And now make the decision whether you want to eat the second food item. And regardless of whether you decide to eat it or not, articulate to yourself your reason for eating it or not eating it. That's the mindful part, right? That's whether you eat it or not, you want to be mindful of eating it and not eating it. And so continue to eat that second food choice mindfully, using that taste satisfaction meter. Or if you're done, set the food down and just notice the absence of food or taste in your mouth. And notice that the absence of taste, texture, saliva is also a sensation. And see if you can let it be there without judgment. All right. And if you're eating that second piece, continuing to eat mindfully. And if that taste satisfaction, that taste satisfaction meter is again a 1 to 10 scale. If it goes below, let's say like a 3 or so, maybe you decide to stop for a moment and check in to see if you really want to continue. When we're eating for pleasure or comfort and not for nutritive value, when that taste satisfaction goes below a 3, when we stop noticing the taste of the food we're eating, it's often time to stop. That's the indicator, right? If we're eating food for pleasure or comfort, we eat it until we no longer taste it, because then it's not bringing pleasure and comfort. All right. So once you finish eating, I'll want you to journal and journal about what you noticed as you ate the food items. When you decided to stop and why. And I want you to engage in this practice a few times over the next couple of weeks. And I want you to start using foods that bring you pleasure or that are comfort foods. So especially if you think you might have a hard time stopping eating once you start, do this in a public place or do it at a time of day where you're not likely to overeat. So it might be mid-morning. But choose a food that brings you pleasure or comfort, sweets or salty or fatty foods that you tend to sneak eat. And afterwards, journal, then you'll engage in the mindful eating exercise. And since these are foods for pleasure and comfort, you'll stop eating when that taste satisfaction gets down to a 3 or a 4. And when you're done, journal about it. Which food did you like better? What kind of thoughts arose as you were eating? Any guilty thoughts? Any thoughts of like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to stop? Did it activate food cravings? What did these food cravings feel like? And how did you respond to them? Were you able to sit through it and notice it as just sensation, just absence with thoughts of, I need more? So that would be one thing to do with this practice. The next thing to do would be to really find the foods that bring you pleasure. So for example, when I eat chocolate, I eat gourmet chocolate and not a Hershey's bar. You could do a taste test between the two and see which one you like better. And then when you want to eat chocolate, eat the food that you really like. Is there a food that you would enjoy just as much, but you'd be less likely to overeat? Like, might you be satisfied with a piece of dark chocolate, but you might feel the need to overeat ice cream? Is there a food that you find as much pleasure in, but is more aligned with your health goals? So this would be a mindful substitution. So for example, I am sensitive to milk. It upsets my stomach. It gives me gas. It's diarrhea, disgusting, the whole 9 yards. So I cannot eat ice cream. My substitute is sherbet. I enjoy that just as much if I get a good brand, right? And it doesn't upset my stomach. So it's more aligned with my health goals. So the goal of this mindful eating exercise with foods that we find pleasurable is to honor and to attune to the pleasure that we find in food. It's to find mindful substitutions, and it's to be able to find which foods, comfort foods, we can eat in moderation. So for example, there are some foods that we tend not to keep in our home because then it's not as special and we eat it too often. And we might just go out for those foods. So typically ice cream. My husband has a tendency to really overeat ice cream, so we don't keep it in the home and we just go out on special occasions. So finding for yourself the foods that you can eat in moderation and that still bring you comfort. Embodied eating is not about deprivation. Embodied eating is about finding pleasure and comfort in food in a way that we can truly enjoy it and in a way that's aligned with our health goals. All right. So as I said earlier, we can be connected to ourselves and to others. I'm sorry, if we're not connected to ourselves and to others, we will overuse food. If we're using food for emotional reasons to assuage loneliness or boredom or anger, we're going to overeat because we're going to get lonely and bored and angry in this life, and we have to learn how to manage that and how to reduce that. So here are a couple of YouTube clips that I want to show. The first is by a gentleman who starts by saying that who starts with some evidence to suggest that when we're connected with others, when we find joy in our lives, we're less likely to be addicted. And I'm not going to show this part, so I'm just describing it quickly. So he talks about these two sets of experiments with rats. And so in one set of experiments with the rats, a rat is in a cage with water laced with cocaine and plain water. And in these experiments, the rat most of the time gets addicted to the cocaine water. If you do the same experiment with several rats in a cage, with a rat park where rats can run around in this park and they can have sex with each other, and you have the cocaine water and the regular water, almost none of the rats get addicted to the cocaine water. And then he goes on to describe I can't remember. I believe it's Portugal, but a country where they've decriminalized drugs and they've spent the money on the war on drugs, where we put people in prison in the US, and they've spent the money on rehabilitation and on getting people employment and reconnected to society. And so in this country, the rate of addiction has fallen by more than 50% over the past decade and a half, and deaths have fallen tremendously, whereas in the US, addiction has actually increased. And so this idea of shaming and blaming and incarcerating is not so helpful. It's about keeping people connected, continuing to show love, and of course set boundaries, because that's what you have to do. So let me start with that video. All right, so as that comes up, there we go. All right, so we'll listen to this.
Is a major driver of addiction. But weird to say it's growing because you think, well, we're the most connected society there's ever been, surely. But I increasingly began to think that the connections we have, we think we have, are like a kind of parody of human connection. If you have a crisis in your life, you'll notice something. It won't be your Twitter followers who come to sit with you. It won't be your Facebook friends who help you turn it around. It'll be your flesh and blood friends who you have deep and nuanced and textured face-to-face relationships with. And I think there's a study I learned about from Bill McKibben, the environmental writer, I think tells us a lot about this. It looked at the number of close friends the average American believes they can call on in a crisis. That number has been declining steadily since the 1950s. The amount of floor space an individual has in their home has been steadily increasing. And I think that's like a metaphor for the choice we've made as a culture, right? We've traded floor space for friends, we've traded stuff for connections, and the result is that we are one of the loneliest societies there has ever been. And yet, Bruce Alexander, the guy who did the Rat Park experiment, says, we talk all the time in addiction about individual recovery. And it's right to talk about that, but we need to talk much more about social recovery. Something's gone wrong with us, not just as individuals, but as a group. And we've created a society where for a lot of us, life looks a whole lot more like that isolated cage and a whole lot less like Rat Park. If I'm honest, this isn't why I went into it, right? I didn't go in to discover the political stuff, the social stuff. I wanted to know how to help the people I love. And when I came back from this long journey and I'd learned all this, I looked at the addicts in my life, and if you're really candid, it's hard loving an addict, and there's going to be lots of people who know in this room you are angry a lot of the time. And I think one of the reasons why this debate is so charged is because it runs through the heart of each of us, right? Everyone has a bit of them that looks at an addict and thinks, I wish someone would just stop you. And the kind of script we're told for how to deal with the addicts in our life is typified by, I think, by the reality show Intervention. If you guys haven't seen it, I think everything in our lives is typified by reality TV, but that's another TED Talk. If you've never seen the show Intervention, it's a pretty simple premise. Get an addict, all the people in their life, gather them together and say, if you don't shape up, they confront them with what they're doing, and they say, if you don't shape up, we're going to cut you off, right? So what they do is they take the connection to the addict and they threaten it. They make it contingent on the addict behaving the way they want. And I began to see why that approach doesn't work. And I began to think that almost that's like the importing of the logic of the drug war into our private lives. So I was thinking, well, how can I be Portuguese, right? And what I try to do now, and I can't tell you I do it consistently, and I can't tell you it's easy, is to say to the addicts in my life that I want to deepen the connection with them, to say to them, I love you, whether you're using or you're not. I love you.
All right. So with that video clip, I want to point out two things. He talks about the importance of connection. As a therapist and as a person who lives in the society and who has kids who are growing up in the society, I deeply believe that that connection is crucial to recover from overeating. And part of that is to reduce that loneliness. So that connecting with others in a deep and meaningful way is so important, whether it's Overeaters Anonymous, Al-Anon, church, a meditation group. It almost doesn't matter what the group is. What's important for recovering from overeating is that it needs to include other people who have a sense of recovering from overeating. So you don't want to join a church group who, talks about the Bible while going to a buffet and overeating. That is not going to be helpful. You could possibly go to a Bible group with other people who have issues with food, who are trying to overcome it and use the Bible as a basis to do that. So that's the first part. The second part that he talks about is showing love for the addict. And I am going to have us reframe that as love for those parts of ourselves that want to overeat, or those parts of ourselves who want to numb out. And I want to be clear, because he's not that clear about this. We need to listen to those parts of ourselves, appreciate those parts of ourselves, and take care of them in the way that they need to be taken care of, and in a way that takes care of our whole system. So that isn't going to mean eating a tub of ice cream. You will want to, as the conductor of your system, you will want to make sure that that overeating part does not eat an entire tub of something, because that's not going to feel good from your system. And if and when it happens, compassion, right? And you get to set boundaries with those parts. And so the second clip is a humorous clip that's more directly related to overeating, and that gets at that kind of negotiation with those parts of ourselves in a fun way. All right. So we'll go back to this YouTube, and we'll go. So this is a woman of a certain age, and it's super fun. And I would actually encourage you to watch the whole clip of this one. All right.
Please. I'm not getting that. But you want it. I know I do. I'm not getting it. But you want it. You did the yoga. You need ice cream. You want ice cream. Look, if I get that ice cream, I'm going to eat the whole thing. And then I'm going to get all hopped up on sugar. And I'm going to wake up in the morning with a sugar hangover. And my pants aren't going to fit. And I'm not going to do that. You won't eat the whole thing. You will only eat a little bit. Please. You've been so good. Please. Hey, I am not getting it. Get it together. You get it together and buy me some fucking ice cream. How about we get some dark chocolate? Huh? That's delicious. Kind of fun. Yeah. Sort of. Just, you get so many emotions. You should numb them. How about we get on Tinder? Ooh. Boys, boys, boys. I love boys. All kinds of boys. Boys, boys, boys.
All right. So that clip is super cute. And what I like about that clip, there are two things. You see Kate listen to that part of her that wants her to overeat, And at first she's like, no, I'm not getting the ice cream. But then once she begins to negotiate with this part, she's able to do that mindful substitution, moving from the ice cream to the chocolate. The kid enjoys that. And then that other type of distraction, like, she's got too many feelings. She needs to numb out, and she knows she doesn't want to overeat. So she goes to boys. And, I'm not suggesting that, I'm not going to go to other boys because I'm happily married. I might go to my husband, but there are different ways to distract and to take care of these parts of ourselves. And, actually, if you continue to watch the clip, you'll see that Kate is single and that she is looking for a relationship. So there's that part. So taking care of those inner parts of ourselves. And then finally, remembering that food cannot replace intimacy. So working with, connecting with others, so we don't need to overutilize food. All right, so the last piece of connecting that I want to focus on today is from a place of compassion and curiosity, which I define as our higher self, to bring love and compassion to the rest of yourself. And so in that first clip, we talk about how critical we tend to be as a way to get ourselves or to get others to change. And almost always being overcritical backfires. What works better is to create a soft container of boundaries and to have loving kindness within this container, so that those parts of us that are hurt or overly emotional feel comfortable and safe staying within our container, and they don't need to go out and numb out. All right, so we'll do about a 5 or a 7 minute meditation. And so I would encourage you to get comfortable and close your eyes if that feels right. And begin to bring your awareness to your breath. And notice your inhale and your exhale. And knowing that you can soften with each breath. And begin by noticing where your body is touching the chair or the floor. And noticing that sensation. And then releasing the awareness of that sensation and bringing your awareness again to the breath. Feeling the inhale and the exhale. And then let your awareness move to any scent or smell that's in the room. And just notice any scent or the absence of scent. And then let your awareness turn to the sense of vision. So if your eyes are closed, just notice what's present You might see some light filtering through. It might be dark. But just noticing what's present with vision. And then just softening and whatever is happening visually, not trying to make it happen, but knowing that whatever's happening happens without you paying awareness to it or doing anything about it. So letting the muscles around the eyes soften. Just imagine the eyeballs floating in the orbit. And then releasing vision and moving to hearing. And again, just let the sound enter into your eardrum and then get transmitted from sound waves into an electrical impulse and letting it register as sound in the brain. And then let your awareness turn to any thoughts or emotions that are present. And just notice the thoughts and emotions that are being produced. And then release that hook on thoughts and emotions and let the awareness turn back towards itself. And notice the calm, compassionate clarity. A sense of openness and spaciousness that naturally happens when awareness turns on itself. And from this calm, compassionate space, imagine breathing in to your heart on the inhale. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be at ease. And on the exhale, letting that circulate through your being. On the inhale, may I be well. May I be happy. May I be at ease. And on the exhale, letting that circulate through your being. So for the next several breaths, may I be well. May I be happy. May I be at ease. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be at ease. And as you recite this loving kindness meditation to yourself, if you find yourself distracted by thoughts, emotions, the senses, or any physical discomfort, bring that loving kindness meditation to that thought, to that sense of discomfort, wherever it might be specifically needed. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be at ease. So I have a weak lower spine. So sometimes I'll bring this loving kindness meditation to that space, to my lower spine. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be at ease. To any sadness within yourself or any sadness that a loved one may have, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be at ease. And so for the next several breaths, directing this loving kindness meditation towards a loved one who may need it, or towards a part of yourself that may need it. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be at ease. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be at ease. And so finishing up with your last mantra and then releasing that loving kindness meditation and returning your awareness to your breath. And then returning your awareness to your physical body by beginning to move fingers and toes. And when you're ready, beginning to broaden your awareness by slowly opening your eyes and coming back to the room and your surroundings. So that's a beautiful loving kindness meditation that you can do over the next couple of weeks. All right, so the second pillar is to eat for blood sugar balance, and this pillar is important because in our society, with all of our processed foods, more and more adults and kids are developing insulin resistance. And when this happens, our cells think that they're starved, and glucose is stored as fat. So what happens is we get really fatigued. Like our muscles can't uptake simple sugars. And so we get really fatigued. And although our muscles can't uptake the sugar, our fat cells can, and then it gets converted to fat. And so people who start to develop insulin resistance will often get fat in their gut and will have like thinner arms and legs. And when we have blood sugar imbalance for an extended period of time, we can get pre-diabetic, diabetic, we're more susceptible to heart disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and pancreatic cancer. And as I said, in the beginning stages, this presents as fatigue. We'll often get carbohydrate craving and jittery. And oftentimes after a meal that has carbohydrates, we'll feel really fatigued after that. And so the way to manage blood sugar is, again, like this is going to sound similar to last time, is to eat less processed foods and more complex carbohydrates, increase fiber so that reduces how quickly sugar enters into our blood system. So vegetables, beans, oats, and fruits that have fiber are pears and apples. So this will help to reduce the spike in blood sugar. Believe it or not, avoiding artificial sweeteners really helps to maintain blood sugar balance. Our system doesn't know what to do with those, and so it really messes up the insulin response. Daily movement really helps with maintaining blood sugar balance. In terms of specific foods, black tea, cinnamon, and fenugreek can help manage blood sugar. And if you are pre-diabetic, or if you find yourself getting tired after meals or really craving carbohydrates, I would suggest the supplement glucose support by Pure encapsulations. So again, over the next 2 weeks, really looking at your processed foods and seeing where you can eat more whole foods, whether it's whole vegetables, whole beans, or whole rice, instead of, tortillas or bread or pastries. If you still eat artificial sweeteners, start decreasing them. And then as you decrease the artificial sweetener, you can, like if you have black tea with artificial sweetener slowly, you might reduce artificial sweetener, then add in a little bit of agave and just use that instead, or learn how to drink it black. But really reducing the fake sugars. All right, and so for the next couple of weeks, again, that movement is so important. And, we talked about how important sleep is too. Getting that formal meditation in is so important, including that loving kindness meditation over the past couple of weeks. And in everyday living, pause 3 times a day to notice and express loving gratitude for your food, your inner parts, and your loved ones. Make 2 mindful substitutions with food. So food that you still enjoy a lot, but is still aligned with your health goals. And allow yourself to experience pleasure and comfort when you eat food. And perhaps do this with another person. And, there's a nice typo. Intentionally connect with someone else who you find pleasurable and have a treat with them. And in terms of food, maintain your eating diary, avoid restricting, commit to reducing inflammation and balancing your blood sugar by incorporating seasonal foods, increasing complex carbs, and reducing simple carbs. And practice these mindful eating exercises. So when you do occasionally have a treat, you're having a small amount and you're enjoying it to its full potential. All right. Thank you. Embodied eating, joyful living these next couple of weeks, and I will see you in 2 weeks. All right, take care.